Welcome back. It's Tuesday night. We're here with another episode of the Even Year Dynasty Show. On this episode, we are going to talk about which two free agents I think the San Francisco Giants should avoid. But before that, we are going to start with some news. It came out a few days ago, but the Giants tendered contracts to all six of their arbitration players, being Tyro Estrada, Tyler Rogers, Lamont Wade Jr., Mike Yastrzemski, Austin Slater, and J.D. Davis. They did agree to two contracts with Mike Yastrzemski and Austin Slater to avoid arbitration. With Mike Yastrzemski, they agreed to $7.9 million. He was projected for $7.3, and with Austin Slater, they agreed to $4 million when he was projected for $3.6 million. None of this is particularly surprising. I think anybody could have told you they were probably going to tender contracts to all six of these arbitration players. They all have value. None of them you should be just letting walk for nothing at this point because of the fact that they have value for who they or for what they produce and the cost that it would be to keep them. So it was a little surprising that they went over. They went about $1 million over combined with Yaz and Slater on the deals that they agreed to, that based on the projections. That said, I don't think it's ever really a bad thing to give players that have been around for a while, produced for your team, giving them a little extra money, especially when you're a team that has struggled to lure in free agents. You need to do everything you can to make it, give off the appearance that you treat your players well and you take care of your players. So I don't think it's a bad thing giving those guys a little bit extra money each. That said, the one thing I will say, there are a lot of people out there that are viewing this as an indication that, oh, great, those two are back. Nothing's changing. They're keeping the same team. To that, I would say it's a long off season, and just because they tendered them contracts does not mean a single thing as far as if they're going to be on the opening day roster or not. As I said, these guys have value. You can't just let them walk away for nothing. So, just because you give them these contracts now doesn't really mean anything. I still anticipate, as I said in previous episodes, I still anticipate in order to create roster space and playing time that two of either Mike Yastrzemski, Austin Slater, Mitch Haniger, or Michael Conforto get traded. I'm going to stick to that, even with the the news that developed there. And both guys, I've seen people coming out and saying, oh, they don't have value, they wouldn't start in other places, yada yada. Mike Yastrzemski, we can say what we want about him, but you're talking about a guy that has consistently produced between 1.8 and 2.6 wins above replacement every year of his career, including in 2020, where he was like fourth in MVP voting. So he is a very consistent player. Are they probably platoon players? Sure. But he has been a very consistent producer in his career. So there are many teams that would take a guy like him, even if he's like a high-end fourth outfielder that can play all three outfield spots well. Austin Slater, he's not as valuable as Mike Yastrzemski, but especially a bench piece that hits against lefties, he has a ton of value. And $4 million for a fourth outfielder is not much. And I have also seen it suggested that maybe a team would want to trade for both of them. That's like missing, needs a right fielder or something. And maybe there's a team out there that might trade for both and just platoon them over in right field, and you might have yourself a 3 to 4 win player over the course of a season there. That's certainly possible, but I think either way, both guys have value. It doesn't really mean anything. Same with the other four players. The only two that I would say are probably locks to return are Tyro Estrada and Tyler Rogers. So the other four, Wade, I've said is probably unlikely to be moved, but I think they're open to it if they get an upgrade at first base. But yeah, this isn't a shock. So The next part of this is we're going to get into the two players that I think the Giants should avoid in free agency. Now, both of these players, I'm going to start off with a disclaimer. I like both of these players, and I absolutely think they would make the Giants better in 2024. So this is not like me trying to disrespect either of these players. This is not me saying that they're terrible. It's really not that. But I will explain my rationale on this as we go. But the first player is Matt Chapman. The pros with Matt Chapman, he's a 4-time Gold Glove winner. He's actually won the Platinum Glove twice, meaning he was the best defensive player in baseball. He's got a career 10.6 walk percentage, so he is a guy that walks a lot. Now, that hasn't necessarily translated into a good on-base percentage. He's often around 330 with that, so he doesn't hit for a high average. He does have solid pop. He produces some very nice exit velocities. He's a guy that'll barrel the ball and hit it hard, which is a good thing. And he's a great leader, and he's been a very consistent producer. His rookie year, if you look at his WAR by season, his rookie year, he had a 2.6 WAR. And every year since then, except for the COVID year, he has produced at least 3.5 wins above replacement. So, the question, and this is what we're going to get into with Matt Chapman. It's not, does he make the team better in 2024? Because that answer is a resounding yes. He absolutely makes the Giants better in 2024. But we're going to go into his cons a little bit here. He's had declining offensive production for 3 straight seasons. And when I say that, I mean he hasn't had over a 757 OPS since 2020, the COVID year. The last 3 years, it has gone 716, 757, 755. He strikes out at about a 29% clip for his career. Last year, he actually had one of his his strikeout rate went down a little bit. It was down about 27%. But, you're still talking about a guy that strikes out almost 30% of the time. That's been like that. It's not, nothing that's really changing. It's been like that his whole career. And the contract he's going to require is probably going to be 5-6 years, and he's going to make 25, maybe more $1 million a year, especially in this thin market. And especially if it's going to come from a team like the Giants, who everybody knows, and Scott Boras is his agent, he knows, the Giants are desperate for star players and big-time players. So they're not going to get a deal on Matt Chapman unless he is just absolutely adamant that he wants to play for Bob Melvin again, which I can understand the connection. I know they love him. I know Matt Williams loves him. And quite frankly, I've really liked Matt Chapman a long time as a ball player. I loved watching him play over in Oakland. He is a really great ball player, and he does things the right way. But my issue that I take from it is he's going into his age 31 season. You're talking about a 5 or 6 year contract. And where I see the Giants currently right now is you see a team that is probably 2 years away realistically from, if things go well, they're probably 2 years away from being a serious championship contender. Right now, they're kind of in this, they're trying to get to being a playoff contender. If Chapman's your big move, I don't see any way this is a playoff team. But, if you piece Chapman in with a couple other small pieces, you might have a team that can scratch and claw its way to 85 to 88 wins, maybe get in the playoffs. And I get it. The Giants have shown it as well as any team in baseball that sometimes you just need to get there and things can happen. But I think realistically looking at it, this team's a couple years away from being a championship team. Now, if suddenly Kyle Harrison's a Cy Young candidate and Marco Luciano's a 30-homer middle of the lineup bat, yeah, okay, that could change things a little bit. And Matos is at the top of the order producing. There are things that could happen that could change the outlook. But right now, looking at this team, they look to be multiple years away. So if you sign a guy like Matt Chapman, you're getting a guy that's going into his age 31 season already declining with the bat, and then hoping, number one, he doesn't go full Longoria and decline further with the bat as well as declining with the glove a little bit. And you're going into your championship window with a 33-year-old third baseman that's probably declined from where he's currently at, and he's on a downward trajectory because that's just the reality of baseball. Players typically decline, and you look at the graph and it goes down as they age. And now you're hoping to compete for a championship with a 33-year-old third baseman that's probably making $25 million. And right when your window opens, rather than having that $25 million to try and invest into positions of need or try and get better and like players that are actually in their prime, you're stuck paying him, and you're going to be stuck paying him for another 3 or 4 years. So with him, it's not that I dislike the player, and it's not that I think they have better options for 2024. It's just that I view him as a guy that is better suited to go to a team that is trying to get over the hump right now, that's in their championship window right now. You know, I mean, a lot of people are not going to like this, but he would actually be a really good fit for probably like Arizona, who just went to the World Series, has Evan Longoria, who may or may not retire, but you know, they could get a guy like Chapman, get a little bit younger at third base, get a big proven leader in a good young clubhouse that's already ready to compete for a World Series. They've already shown that. And he would fit in better in a team like that that's trying to get over the hump, not a team like the Giants where they're trying to get the hump they're trying to get over. It's just getting to the playoffs. So that's kind of where I'm at. That said, I love his leadership. I love watching him play in orange and black. I just don't think it's a smart investment for the team. And the other part of that is, whatever side of his game you want to look at, he's a more complete player than either JD Davis or Casey Schmidt. But if you look at a guy like Chapman, like JD Davis produces similarly offensive numbers. His last 3 years, he's had an 820 OPS, a 758 OPS, and a 738 OPS. Similar strikeout rates, similar walk rates, similar WRC plus and OPS plus, and all these numbers you look at. JD Davis just doesn't play in a full-time role as much until last season. And last season, they had similar seasons offensively, and JD ended up being worth about 2.2 WAR versus Chapman's 3.5. So, Chapman is very clearly a better glove, and JD Davis, I mean, frankly, the bats are pretty close. I will give Chapman some credit here. If you look at his StatCast and go on Baseball Savant and look at his spray charts, he hit 17 home runs last year. According to that, at least, it probably would have actually been 5 to 7 more in Oracle Park, which is actually pretty impressive. But, right-handed hitter, it plays better for righties and lefties, as we kind of talked about in the Luis Robert video. But that said, I don't know if it's fair or reasonable to expect that Matt Chapman is suddenly going to have an offensive resurgence and find his swing playing an Oracle versus more hitter-friendly environment. I mean, Toronto is a more hitter-friendly park, and it's in the AL East, which is like filled with hitter-friendly parks. So I don't know if that's a fair, hope with Matt Chapman, is that, he'll play Gold Glove defense and then he's going to find his bat, and then we won't care. So, JD has produced at a similar rate. And then if we even look at the defense, the Giants do have Casey Schmidt, who I understand struggled offensively. I've already made my case as to why I think they can and should give him the time to develop and go ahead and play him every day at third base. But just comparing him strictly to Matt Chapman in this situation, I mean, you have a guy who you're looking to replace a guy that got direct Matt Chapman comps coming up, and that's who they compare his glove to, and compared it coming out of college, and was viewed as a generational glove at third base with the guy that's 6 years older, and it's the guy they're directly comparing him to. Which, if we want to look at their defensive production last year, Matt Chapman played 1,213 and 2/3 innings at third base. he was worth 12 defensive runs saved and 4 outs above average. Casey Schmidt played 236 innings, was worth at third base. And I'm only strictly talking about third base because, as I've said in the past, Casey Schmidt should be left at third base. They should stop moving him around and stop jerking him around, playing him in other positions, which is just going to destroy his confidence defensively. Put him where he's elite and leave him there. Casey Schmidt at third base last season played 236 innings, 2 defensive runs saved, 2 outs above average. Now, obviously, we don't know for sure if he would have maintained that over the same amount of innings, but we're going to play the game here and pace that out over the same amount of innings as Matt Chapman, and it comes out to roughly 10 defensive runs saved and 10 outs above average. So with Casey Schmidt, you're looking at a guy that could potentially produce a similar impact defensively, not guaranteeing anything. We obviously, like I said, we don't know if he does, but he could potentially produce a similar impact, and he'd be making less than $1 million, which, yeah, we still have to worry about his hitting. We'll see if the bat develops. I've said that I think if his bat could at least get up to about a 700 OPS, be right around there, he'd probably be worth anywhere from 2 to 3 wins above replacement. So he could be like a Matt Chapman light player for, a 25th the cost. So, and it's not that I'm advocating, let's just be cheap and let's play Moneyball and try and, no, it's strictly asset allocation. It is try and get similar production out of a guy that we think can produce close to the same numbers for a fraction of the cost, and allocate those assets to other positions of need. The Giants shortstop's a bit of a question mark right now. We're hoping Marco Luciano. He's struggling in winter ball. I don't really put too much stock in that, but they're looking for help up the middle. They need help in center field, way worse than they need help at third base. So it just comes down to how are they going to allocate this money? So I don't personally believe Chapman's the right play there. So we're going to move on from that. Second player that I think they should avoid would be Blake Snell, which, yes, I want I would love to have the Cy Young winner on the Giants staff. I think Blake Snell's awesome. I think he's got some filthy stuff. He's a 2-time Cy Young winner, which, funny enough, he's only made one All-Star team. Kind of the oddity of baseball with the All-Star game being in the middle of the season. Stuff like that can happen. But he has he has over 11 strikeouts per 9 over the course of his career, and he has a career 3.2 ERA. So you might ask, why is it that I don't think the Giants should go sign Blake Snell? It's kind of a similar thing with Chapman, a little bit different, but it's kind of similar when it has to do with the age. But the first thing with him is inconsistency. He has a career walks over 4 walks per 9. He did, I believe, lead the league by a lot in walks last season. Now, he was incredible at limiting the amount of walked batters that from scoring. And he has 3 years with an over 4 ERA, which is kind of where I'm going with the whole consistency thing. When you get rid of the 2 Cy Young years and you strictly look at the other 5 seasons, you're talking about a guy that averaged about a 108 ERA plus, which, for those that are unfamiliar with that, ERA plus 100 is league average. Every point above or below is a percent better or worse than league average. So at 108, he has been essentially 8% better than league average in the 5 seasons that didn't involve him winning a Cy Young. So you're talking about a guy that his track record so far is he wins a Cy Young or he's like barely above a league average pitcher. Then you factor in, if you look at the innings that he's pitched in his career, his 2 Cy Young years, he's pitched 180 and 2/3 innings and 180 innings this last season. So he doesn't go 3 times through the lineup. He goes about 5 or 6 innings consistently, and he's very good and consistent at getting through that many innings. So I'll give him credit there. But he doesn't throw a ton of innings, but he is pretty effective in the innings that he pitches. So Where am I getting? And then you get rid of the Cy Young years, and he's never thrown more than 129 innings in any of the other seasons. So where am I going with this? The projections for a guy like Blake Snell, who is also entering his age 31 season, is for him to get approximately a 7-year deal, which with Aaron Nola currently signing a 7-year deal, who knows, that deal could end up being 8 or 9. But you're looking at a 31-year-old that's, we'll say he gets 7 years. So you're going to pay him from his age 31 through his age 37 seasons. And his track record is 2 of those seasons are going to be really good. 5 of those seasons are going to just be kind of a league average pitcher. But that doesn't even factor in, again, the normal decline of players. Should we reasonably expect for him to have 2 more Cy Young years in his career? Probably not. His best years are probably behind him now. And, you can say that about every player, especially when they hit free agency, that, they're probably not going to, the end of the deal is going to look bad. But I mean, we're talking about a guy that the last 4 years of this deal could look bad. And we all remember Zito when they picked him up. And it was just kind of a nightmare from the start. And yes, he redeemed himself in 2012, but it was a nightmare and it just never seemed to get better. And, we can try and use the pitcher's park excuse for Snell and go, oh, they're playing in San Francisco. It'll get, well, didn't for Zito. So I just, paying a guy like him $30 million a year and figuring that 5 of those years you're going to get like barely better than league average production or around league average, and this is like best case scenario, it feels like. I just think that's foolish. And again, we're getting to asset allocation, and there are guys out there that they should be targeting instead. Obviously, it takes 2 to tango. You have no control if a guy like Yoshinobu Yamamoto is going to want to come or not, but there's no excuse for them not to have the biggest offer for a guy like that. And guys like him, guys like Jung-Hoo Lee, guys like Cody Bellinger, these are all guys that are 28 or 25 years old that they can help you win now in 2024, try and make your team better in 2024, get that playoff push, but also in 2 years when you're, kind of how I'm looking at it, in 2 years when you're thinking, all right, we're going to be ready to start everyone wants the Dodger type run, winning 100 games a year for a decade and making the playoffs every year and having a shot every year. If you're going to invest in these guys, invest in the young guys where you're going to get guys that are 25 that, in 2 years when you think your window is going to open, they're going to be 27. Or in Bellinger's case, he'd be going into his age 30 season with still several years of, several prime years left. So I look at these 2 guys and it reeks of desperation, which, yes, the Giants are desperate. And I think everyone knows it. Every agent knows it. Every fan of every other team probably knows the Giants are desperate at this point, especially with what's happened with Judge and Correa last offseason and how boring they were to watch this past season. But just because you're desperate and just because you need stars, you still have to be semi-smart with what you're doing with your money and how you're investing it, especially if your aspirations are long-term success and not just, we've been bad and missed the playoffs all but one season since 2016. So, let's go all in on making the playoffs for 3 years and then we'll just deal with the consequences in 3 years. I don't think it's a smart way to run the team. I get it. We're all tired of watching them stink and lose and be mediocre and win 81 games or 79 this last year. We all want to see them win, but there's, I feel like, a way that they can do both, trying to win as well as trying to win in the future and build for a strong future with this team. So whether it's going over those 3 guys I mentioned, or maybe they get lucky with Ohtani, but I'm not going to hold my breath there, or trading for young pieces. Giants have a ton of young pitching. I think there are just better avenues and better ways to allocate their money than on those 2 free agents. Now, that said, if somehow either of them would sign a short-term deal, course I'm all over that, and I'd say go for it. And also, the Giants are luckily in a situation where it wouldn't cripple them if they got one of these guys. The reality is they have about $70 million coming off the books in 2025 offseason, so after this coming season, because they'll have 18 million from Conforto, 12.5 from each of Stripling and DeSclafani, 10 million from Cobb, 6.5 from Flores. Slater would be off the books if he's still on the roster even. They could non-tender Yaz next year when he probably would be making more money, where they wouldn't really want to pay a 34-year-old outfielder that if he's around next year. JD Davis is going to be a unrestricted free agent next year, so that'll be another $7.5 million. So I mean, the Giants have like $70-something million coming off their payroll next offseason. So one of these contracts isn't going to cripple them. I just don't think it's the right play long term. So thanks for everyone for tuning in. Comment, tell me, like, subscribe, comment, tell me if you think I'm insane for the way I'm viewing this. Tell me if you agree. You can always follow me on Twitter at EYD Show. Also, send me any questions, whether it's there or anywhere else, if you want me to answer anything or cover any other topics, anything that you guys want me to talk about. Hopefully we get more news. It's been kind of we're in that dead part of the offseason when just absolutely nothing seems to happen. But, to be expected. We have the holiday tomorrow. So other than that, I will talk to everyone hopefully soon. If not, it'll probably be Saturday after all the holiday stuff is over with. But thanks everybody again for tuning in, and see you soon. Bye.